Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to see the crowd here in Gaston Hall. I'm Andrew Imbrie. I'm the Gracias Chair for Security and Emerging Technology in the School of Foreign Service, and I teach on the core faculty in the Security Studies program. And on behalf of everybody who has helped to organize this conference, I could not be more delighted to welcome you to the Hilltop in historic Gaston Hall for this special event. And it's nice to know that a long night of trick-or-treating has not spoiled anyone's appetite for robust tech policy and intelligence discussions. So I think we're off to a really good start. As all of you know, an event like this requires a lot of teamwork to bring together. So I just want to thank a few very special people who made this whole event possible. First, the Kalaris family. Their generosity has made this event and events past possible, and we're so grateful for their support. I know that we have members of the Kalaris family here with us today, so my heartfelt thanks to you. I also want to thank the entire team at the Center for Security Studies, Dr. Dan Byman and Dr. Rebecca Patterson for their leadership, and a very special personal heartfelt thank you for myself to Jenna DeFossi and Abby Frymouth, who have done so much to organize this conference. It really would not be possible without them. I also want to thank our friends and colleagues at the Center for Security and Emerging Technology, our co-sponsors for today's event, Dr. Dewey Murdoch, Tessa Baker, Igor Mikulich, Carolina Penchon, and the whole team there for their wonderful partnership. And I'm especially thankful to Georgetown's protocol team, Mary Haynes, Jacob Menner, Jackson Menner, Jacob Mendel at Events Services and Management, and all of our wonderful student volunteers for everything they've done to pull this event together. So I hope we can just give them a round of applause for their hard work. So one of the great gifts of teaching at a place like this is you get to spend hours every week with some really remarkable students who can test your assumptions and widen your perspectives. And I had a moment like this earlier this semester in my Tools for Technology Policy course. A student asked me, how has the tech policy conversation changed in DC over the last 15 years? What assumptions were true back then that perhaps no longer hold true still today? And I thought it was a terrific question, and it got me thinking about the bookends of my own career so far. You know, when I was sitting where many of you are as a Georgetown student myself, I was a young staffer on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and at the time, we were centrally focused on the war in Afghanistan, on complex regional dynamics, how to calibrate our diplomatic and development aid. And this was a central focus of the committee, of many of its hearings. Most of us were pulled into this effort. And if you look back, not a lot of congressional committees or agencies in the government had dedicated staffers to cybersecurity or emerging technology policy questions. Often it was taken on as a collateral duty. Fast forward 15 years, and I was explicitly brought back in the government to work on technology policy issues in the multilateral context at our US mission to the UN. And when I looked around the State Department, almost every functional and regional bureau had somebody dedicated to these issues. By the time I left, the State Department had stood up its first Cyberspace and Digital Policy Bureau and an Office of the Envoy for Emerging Technology. So the bureaucratics have transformed, but so have the policy issues. Innovation today is much more globalized and dispersed. It requires us to stitch together a whole array of actors and inputs in our dynamic innovation ecosystem. Economic security concerns are front and center for many government officials, and national security concerns increasingly permeate corporate decision-making on everything from investment to supply chains. So it's a really big, complicated landscape, and a lot of us at Georgetown have been thinking hard about how the United States can position itself for success in this new environment. And I would commend all of you a recent CSET study called the Policy Playbook, which I think frames the issues so well. The United States has three big objectives when it comes to technology policy. The first is to run faster. How can we promote broad-based innovation at home and make sure that we are pulling in all contributors, playing to our strengths, focusing on the variables in our control for comparative advantage? The second is to slow down competitors, to make sure that we're countering the misuse of technology by authoritarian competitors and protecting sensitive technologies. The third is safety. Even as we run faster at home and slow down competitors, how do we see farther across the threat and opportunity horizon? And in this regard, we can focus on everything from safety to governance to regulation. These are big goals, and they exist in a dynamic equilibrium. They require constant tending and management. But the good news is that the US government has a whole array of tools at its disposal to make sure that it's achieving its mission. To run faster, we can lean on loans and grants and research and development, competition policy, education, and workforce investments. To slow down competitors, we can use sanctions, export controls, investment screening. And for safety, right, to see farther, we can, of course, rely on research analysis, intelligence sharing. We can invest in standards, testing, and safety. A lot of these tools come with complex trade-offs and tensions. And I just want to name 3 of them for all of you to think about over the course of today. The first is calibrating effects and anticipating unintended consequences. Right? Take export controls. We want to make sure our companies are innovative, that they're exporting to foreign markets, but we also want to make sure that our innovations aren't fueling destabilizing military activities or human rights abuses. So export controls can be one way to protect those sensitive technologies and guard against those outcomes. But at times, if improperly applied, they can inadvertently hamper the progress of companies at home and create incentives for allies and partners to design out US origin technology and software, as we've seen in the past. So how do we get this balance right? The second tension and trade-off is strategic coherence. How do we make sure that we're applying the right tools to the right problems, that they're not improperly targeted, and that they are part of comprehensive strategies? Because whenever you pull on one lever of technology policy, it creates ripple effects and implications for every other tool, for every other agency, company, and firm involved in this process. The third is partnership, international collaboration and domestic collaboration. As all of you know, the United States can't do this work on its own, and the government can't do its work on its own. This is a vastly transformed research and development landscape with many more actors. Industry, academic labs, and research centers play a huge role in the innovation landscape. So how do we make sure that we are calibrating our partnerships, that we're investing in them wisely? Some of the toughest debates sometimes happen with your closest allies and partners. So how do we get that right? So it's a very big agenda, a busy, complicated, contested landscape internationally, but we are so fortunate to have some luminaries and really brilliant people with us today to help us navigate the path. So we're going to start out today. We're very honored to have Dr. Stacey Dixon, the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, with us, and we'll hopefully learn a bit more about how the IC is staying nimble, adopting emerging technologies, adapting the analytical toolkit for emerging technologies. We'll then sit down, I will sit down with Dr. Dixon for a moderated Q&A with our students and audience, so it's a chance for you to engage in a dialogue with her. And then we will go to our first panel on how to promote innovation and protect critical technology. And this is a critical look at how we balance across these goals of tech protection, safety, and innovation while managing complex dynamics in geopolitics and integrated supply chains. We'll then have a break for lunch. We'll come back. Dr. Dewey Murdoch from the Center for Security and Emerging Technology will welcome us back. And then we'll have a chance for a second keynote conversation with Dr. Reggie Brothers and Undersecretary of State Bonnie Jenkins. And we'll hear about the diplomatic toolkit. How is the State Department thinking about the international security dynamics and implications of emerging technology? We'll then move into our second panel of the day that looks at public-private collaboration. You know, increasingly, the Defense Department, the IC, many agencies are looking to the private sector to adopt innovative technologies, and the private sector has to navigate its own complex geopolitics. So we'll look at this dynamic and how the United States can best leverage it for strategic advantage, particularly in the conflict in Ukraine right now, but looking beyond to future contingencies as well. And then we'll break and we'll have a career fair for our students. So I'm excited about the agenda. I think we have a lot on the plate. It's great to see such a robust audience for the discussion today. And to help get us started, I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Dan Byman to the stage. All of you know Dr. Byman, I assume. He doesn't need much of an introduction. He is world-renowned for his research on terrorism and counterterrorism issues. But I do just want to say personally, I think Dr. Byman sets the standard for gracious professionalism. It may not seem obvious for everyone interested and focused on tech policy, but to do well in this area, you have to be a good listener, a good communicator, you have to lead with empathy and respect, and you have to be able to bring people together from diverse sectors of our society and forge coalitions. And Dr. Byman does that and exemplifies those qualities and more. So we're so lucky to have him at the helm at the Center for Security Studies, and I'm delighted to welcome him to the stage. So the floor is yours.
Good morning and welcome everyone to the Kalaris Intelligence Conference. I'm not going to repeat all of Andrew's thanks, but I will emphasize my gratitude for the Kalaris family and also for our partners at CSET, and I think, of course, the tremendous role that Andrew himself has played in creating this conference and allowing it to move forward. In the pre-Cambrian era, I was an intelligence analyst, and I am always wary of hyperbole as a result. But I think it's safe to say that rapid innovation is changing every aspect of intelligence. We're going to learn a lot about that today, but at least 5 questions came to mind as I was thinking over what we're going to hear today. And the first was simply, who are the partners for the intelligence community? There's a wide range of open source and commercial data now available. And I think even more importantly, most of the emerging technologies are happening in the private sector, whether it's AI and other forms of machine learning, biotech. Who is the intelligence community going to be working with? A second question concerns the time frame and reaction. Everything is compressed. How will the intelligence community respond to even faster decision-making? A third concerns the interaction with policy. There are new policy customers, new policy partners. A fourth is the intelligence community itself as an incubator of technology. And the last, which is special to me as an educator, is the role of human capital. And what investments does the intelligence community need to make in its workforce and development, and what reforms are necessary to ensure it has the right people in place? I can't think of a better person to begin this conversation than Dr. Stacey Dixon. Dr. Dixon is the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. She has served over 20 years in the intelligence community, often at its highest ranks. She held senior positions at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, as well as IARPA, and was also on Capitol Hill. I would stress her education, not surprisingly as a professor, that she has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Stanford, as well as a doctorate and master's degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. And she's someone who truly understands both sides of the intelligence and technology worlds. For our students in the audience, I would note that she did not originally plan to work in the intelligence community. She was originally looking for work in biomedical engineering. I'm very glad for the intelligence community and frankly for all of us that these goals changed, and we're delighted to welcome you here today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Dixon.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, for those online, there really are people in the audience. Let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. It is really great to be here. It has been several years since I was a part of the Kalaris conference, and it's wonderful to be back. And I always forget how beautiful this room is, and how I just want to sort of sit here and stare at the walls. So forgive me if I get a little distracted. But I think both Andrew and Dan, and thank you both for having me here, but set the stage very nicely for not only the conversation that I want to at least start today and then get into as part of the Q&A, but really for the conversations that you'll be having all day, which I think are wonderful ones. Ones that challenge us in the community, and frankly are ones that we continue to try to work through to figure out how to best leverage and protect against the changing and emerging technology landscape. I spoke here last when I was the director of IARPA, the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Activity, which is essentially the organization you go to when you have a really hard problem that can be solved with science and technology. And that was certainly an opportunity for me to talk about technology more specifically. What I remember from that engagement, though, was the enthusiasm and the great questions that came from the audience. And so no pressure on you all today, but I am looking forward to your Q&A. Again, also let me thank the hosts, both Georgetown University Center for Security Studies and the Center for Security and Emerging Technology. I can't think of a better place to come and have this conversation. And thanks also to the Kalaris family for allowing this conversation to happen year after year, and for all that you do and all that, frankly, Mr. Kalaris did to support our community when he was part of it. My experience in the intelligence community, whether that is with the current role that I have, whether it's when I was at IARPA, whether it was when I was at NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, CIA, or the National Reconnaissance Office, it's given me a really deep respect for the incredible people and the fantastic capabilities that we have in our community. And that's across all domains, whether air, space, sea, land, or cyber, as well as the disciplines in which we operate, in human, in geospatial intelligence, and SIGINT, and others. The capabilities include, but are not limited to, the technology that we develop and deploy. Some of the concepts and the ideas that began within the intelligence community or were propelled forward by our community have become extraordinarily important and have given us an enormous edge, while others have frankly had a more challenging journey, and some of those concepts which didn't survive at the time and didn't succeed at the time have often been resurrected later, often in ways their original developers did not intend, to get to that point about unintended consequences, unintended applications. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a historical project, just because a lot of it has been said now and can be spoken about publicly, but I think it gives you a good sense of our community. And that is Project Corona, which was a formerly secret, now declassified, overhead photo reconnaissance satellite. And the planning began for Corona in the 1950s, which was, frankly, before anyone had launched anything into space. The idea at the time was literally that something out of science fiction. But soon it became very urgent and a very real priority, as months later the Soviets launched Sputnik. Suddenly we were behind in a Cold War against a ruthless, autocratic adversary. And at first, and many times, there was failure. Shortly after Sputnik, the United States tried to launch a satellite, and it blew up on the launch pad. And so did Corona's first attempt to get into orbit a few months later. In 1960, however, Corona had its first success, and soon it was up and running, giving the United States a reconnaissance edge that no one could match. And you may know Corona from your studies as the program that produced pictures that definitively proved that there was no missile gap between the United States and the Soviet Union, and its output also supplemented the U-2 photographs that were used during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, you may be asking yourself, what does this have to do with me, and why does a program that existed before, I would say, the vast majority of people in this room were even born, why is it important to talk about? It's important to talk about because it's part of our heritage of the technological achievement and innovation of the intelligence community. It's something that I'm also really proud of because of that. Innovation is a hallmark of who we are in the intelligence community and what we do. And I hope that in our time together today, I'll convince some of you that you might want to become part of this community after you leave the university. If you think of the greatest American scientists, the creators of the internet, the inventors of the global positioning system, GPS, and the technology behind things like Google Maps, they and many others have worked closely with the intelligence community and our predecessors to help us win wars, protect our national security, and usher in peace. Corona's story, in particular, is a reminder of our proud history at the cutting edge of innovation. That reputation for innovation is one we take very seriously, and upon which each generation of the workforce that continues to seek and build that. Today, we are working in the cutting edge, and sometimes still even almost in the realm of science fiction. Often highly classified work that really can't be done anywhere else because there isn't really the mission that would need the type of things that we create. There's a saying about history that says history does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And when we talk about a Sputnik moment, or a hinge in history. We were in one when Sputnik was launched, and when Corona was launched, and we are in one now. These moments are rare, but they're truly pivot points in history that define their times. And I'll give you just a few examples, some from the past and some more recent. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, totally changed cryptology, signals intelligence, and so many other areas, and began our active and ultimately decisive engagements in a world at war. September 11, 2001, shifted America's and our closest allies' focus to counterterrorism, and literally led to the creation of both the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, where I work. Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, upended assumptions about peace in Europe, peace and security in Europe. And it's informing us of the capabilities that we need to win in multi-domain battlefields, of the critical need for deep and wide partnerships, and setting the contours for the strategic competition that is defining this time in history. Corona is a reminder that many of the fundamental imperatives of understanding, developing, and deploying technology remain the same, even if the names, and in some cases, the names have changed, but the pace of change continues to accelerate. President Biden recently said that he expects that in the next 5 years, we will see more technologically driven change than in the last 50 years. 50 years ago, the last people to set foot on the moon had just left. 50 years ago, Henry Kissinger was in China negotiating with the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party. And just over 50 years ago, the last Corona mission ended. Today, we're going back to the moon. Today, the successors of Corona are still out there orbiting the Earth, giving us incredible insights on a daily basis. And back over the summer, at the age of 100, Henry Kissinger was back in China, talking with the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party. Some things change and others stay the same. In order to compete in this world, we need you. We need the next generation to join us so that we can stay ahead and compete and really answer those really complicated policy, technology conversations and questions that arise along the way. If some of this sounds like a pitch for some of you to join and partner with us, especially the students here, that's because it is. Your digital outlook, your natural interest in collaborating, your knowledge and your commitment to this country, to our people, and to the values that we cherish will all be essential in our shared future and the success of that future. One essential element, both then and now, is the need for dedicated, creative people to be part of the intelligence community. Another is the critical role that great partners in academia and in industry, as well as our global alliances, play in not only our success, but in the success of many missions around the world. Back in the day, in Project Corona, both of those were present. Our partnerships then included one of the most prolific inventors in industry, Edwin Land, who was not only the founder and CEO of the Polaroid Corporation, but he was a scientist with more patents to his name than almost anyone in American history. His company did work with the CIA on issues related to polarization, cameras, film stability, including work that made Corona a success. Land was also a forefront of the affirmative action movement and hired women as research scientists when few organizations would, including the CIA at the time. Yet there were incredible women and people of diverse backgrounds who did persevere in our intelligence community, including one that I'll mention now, Betty Louise Johnson, a National Reconnaissance Office pioneer. She designed and developed one of the first computer software systems for overhead reconnaissance. She turned Corona from a very manual and slow capability into something that was automated, something that was rapid and highly responsive to the exponentially increased its value. She was so closely associated with these advances that the software behind the system was given the nickname Project Betty. She laid the foundation for people like me, for women like me who followed in her footsteps. Having a diverse, equitable, and inclusive work environment lets us bring in, develop, and retain a very wide range of talented Americans who want to contribute to our mission and be of service to our nation. For those of us in the intelligence community, innovation is not just theoretical, but it's intimately related to practical applications. In our science and technology work, we think of innovation as a creative process, often with the technology adjacent to the ideas that we need to solve, adjacent to the ideas we need to solve our problems, with the problem often leading to a solution which may or may not be technology-based. In practice, the scope of innovations that we seek go beyond technology to a variety of solutions that can be technology-driven. However, they may not be solving necessarily a technical problem. For example, improving processes, reducing bureaucratic burden, removing duplication, increasing automation, making it easier to collaborate or to communicate, implementing ideas like classification reform, or the development of tools and rules and processes that enhance what we call acquisition agility, our ability to do business more expediently. All of these require innovation in different ways, and so I am often very quick to say that innovation and technology, while are linked, technology and innovation, there's so much more innovation out there that's needed than just in those technical areas. For each new technology and capability, we also need people who can understand it, who can use it, and ultimately who can make it so that the technology meets the mission need. We also need leadership, not just those innovators who plant the seeds of new ideas, but leaders who have the faith in those individuals to nurture them. Fostering the innovation environment we need takes policies and incentives and tools to bind, communicate, and educate those within and without the intelligence community. And one area that is both a combination of technology and process improvements is what we call data fusion, or data orchestration. It's a massive undertaking that will transform and will touch almost everything we do in the intelligence community, almost every piece of information that we collect. First and foremost, this process will give us the ability to develop compatible systems to process data end-to-end across platforms, across domains, across disciplines, to collect, organize, and exploit and disseminate it seamlessly. Being able to do all of this will support other things that are critical and cutting edge, such as quantum technologies, synthetic biology, our increasing resilience in critical networks. Data fusion most directly takes advantage of the capabilities of artificial intelligence and machine learning by applying data automation to vast data sets. We can tap into vast pools of open source data, organize it, and extract what is relevant, and use that for our missions as well. This will provide a comprehensive picture and a continued decision advantage for us and for those customers that we have, the policymakers, the warfighters, the diplomats, as well as our ability to disseminate information to allies and partners that are beyond the intelligence community on a much faster pace, to give them what they need, when they need it, where they need it, and to do so in a very secure fashion. The process that gets us there will take time, and frankly, it's a long-term focus of our community, but that one that we're driving with urgency, though, in the short term. And in many ways, we're being pressed to do this by our competitors, particularly by China, who's also seeking the same types of capabilities to be able to take all of that information and create the insights that are needed for the policymakers. And at the end of the day, those that have this capability will have an enormous strategic advantage, and those that don't just won't have it. These kind of forward-looking investments represent a strategic shift, a move from a system-centric approach embodied in the legacy systems that got us to today, legacy systems like Corona, to one that's data-centric, one that treats data as a strategic asset. This strategy, which is at the heart of our IC data strategy, meets the moment of the very hyper-connected, data-driven digital world that we're in, and that we know is not going to slow down anytime soon. This shift also strengthens our most important partnerships. It takes advantage of the complex, incredible capabilities that we have and the brilliance of our people. It keeps us as a leader in a very complicated world in which the threats that we face continue to expand and expand into areas that were not traditionally considered national security in the past. Areas like climate change, migration, cybersecurity, economic security, and global health, for example. I'm going to leave you now sort of where I started, discussing Corona, but a different kind of corona. The coronavirus that we've lived with has, for many of you, defined your time in school. Approximately 100 years before the COVID-19 struck, the Spanish flu, a variant of H1N1 influenza virus, spread throughout the world, and there were no effective treatments. And it's estimated that between 2.5 and 5% of the world's population died, 50 to 100 million people. Fast forward to 2020 and our global confrontation of COVID-19. The innovative capabilities of broad swaths of our government and industry and our allies were unleashed. Academia and industry played vital roles, not just at that moment, but really in the decades preceding it in coming up with the ideas that we were able then to actually leverage. And while far from perfect, we organized and mobilized resources and capabilities that allowed us to do business differently. We, the government, that is. We broke down barriers between elements of government and strengthened bonds between them, including NIH, FEMA, CDC, DoD, and the intelligence community as well. We used economic and financial levers in innovative ways to protect our economy, to spur innovation, and to create operational solutions with the private sector and encourage research. At the end of the day, it was the United States and our allies, not Russia, not China, not autocratic countries, that developed the first effective vaccines and put them into practice. While the virus still took millions of lives, millions of others were saved because of emerging, novel, and creative technological innovations that were put to work. We came together in common cause with great partners and great people, focused on solving a complex challenge. And that is what we need to do now, to think differently and come up with ways to meet our national security needs. And this means finding ways to better capture and encourage innovation. The world will not stop, nor would we want it to. The challenges will not cease. And it will be up to those of us that are here, those in the room, those listening online, to find innovative solutions and protect our nation as we did yesterday, as we're doing today, and as we must do tomorrow. So at this point, I'm going to take my seat, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, Dr. Dixon, that was a fantastic laydown of the intelligence community's priorities and how it's looking to emerging technology opportunities and challenges. I was reminded of a quote when I was listening to you from President Truman: "The only thing new in the world is the history you don't know." And I'm so glad we now know about Project Corona and Project Betty. It was wonderful to hear that history. So I was thinking about what you said on data fusion and the importance of applying artificial intelligence and machine learning to data to really leverage its insights and treat it as a strategic asset. And I think many of you in the audience probably saw the executive order on artificial intelligence earlier this week. So it got me thinking, I'd be fascinated to hear from you, what do you think are some of the applications of AI today that might be overhyped, since we've seen hype cycles in the past on this? And what might be underhyped applications of AI in the near future, in 2 to 3 years, that might require the intelligence community to really think about innovation in unconventional ways and adapt its analytical tradecraft?
Oh, wow, that's a great way to phrase the question, frankly, Andrew. When I think about what potentially is overhyped and underhyped, let's see. I think there's an aspect to artificial intelligence that it's going to be able to really solve everything, and that there may be sort of like one thing, one system that we build that's going to do it all. And I think those that are out there doing the research know that you really do focus on very specific things that you're trying to achieve with your particular algorithms that you're writing. So the sort of one AI that's going to take over it all, that is definitely overhyped at the moment. However, there are very, very real applications that can be applied now. And I think actually, as we saw earlier in the year with the development, delivery, the publicity, and the sort of the adoption of those large language models. So some would say that we're sort of at a bit of hype with that. However, I'm also seeing it used in ways, and people trying to understand it in ways, and recognizing both the opportunity in terms of how do you help it with all of that information that's out there, how do you help you with the sense making, but also with the threats. How do others leverage it to be able to not only create better misinformation and disinformation, for example, or how do you see other people using it to develop capabilities that, frankly, they would never have been able to do on their own, but because now they have access to something that they can ask such questions of, they're able to come up with things that frankly are very dangerous for the world. So being able to, that one is sort of in a bit of a hype moment, but it's also one that I think it's not going to be hype for long. We'll kind of figure out one way or the other how we're going to be able to kind of live with, as well as counter the threats that it's possibly going to be bringing to us.
Very good. I would encourage everyone to take a moment to line up and ready your questions. And as you do, please identify yourselves, say who you are, where you're coming from, and then phrase your comments in the form of a brief question. So I encourage all of you to do that now. I'll take the liberty as the moderator to ask another question or two, but this is a great chance to have a dialogue with Dr. Dixon.
Can I say one more?
Yeah, please.
So a lot of times when we talk about artificial intelligence, it can come from, and not necessarily in the practitioner areas, right? But it can come from a place of fear of what it will do to society, what it will do, whether the AI will be making decisions, frankly, that are life or death decisions for people, that are like life-changing decisions for people. And one of the things, and you mentioned the executive order, and what we do in the intelligence community as we're thinking about artificial intelligence, we started with our principles of ethics. Like how are we as a community going to be leveraging technologies like that? That is fundamentally a part of how we think about that. And you see that in the EO. How do we make sure that we're building in protections, looking for the opportunities, of course, but also making sure that it's not going to create these unintended consequences that you mentioned that are going to impact elements of society differently, or even cause challenges in ways, or cause the creation of threats that wouldn't have existed before that AI was there. And so I really appreciate the fact that that is a huge part of the conversation. Now, the privacy and civil liberties protections and the ethics behind how we will be using it.
Absolutely. I see we already have some intrepid students, so please take it away.
Thanks for being here today, ma'am. My name's Andrew. I'm a graduate student in the McCourt School of Public Policy. The great philosopher Yogi Berra once said that predictions are hard, especially about the future, but I'd still love to hear you make a prediction. You mentioned China. It's hard to go anywhere in this town without hearing the word China. It's pretty much the biggest word on every policymaker's lips these days. Can you make a prediction about what the relationship with China looks like in the next 50 years? Do you think that the most dramatic characterizations of the threat from China are based on sound intelligence? Can you give us any sort of context of what to expect, what's around the corner, and is it apocalyptic or at least as bad as some people make it sound?
I think China is interesting in that a lot of what we see in the intelligence community also comes from things that are like public statements of China's, right? In terms of its desire for indigenization, which is nothing's wrong with that, but sort of cutting yourself off from the world in the sense where you want to make all the things yourself. And we know in the past there have been technologies and capabilities developed, frankly, in the US that have been stolen by China and others to accelerate their programs. So not only are they sort of trying, and then used to gain market share in the world. So it's sort of, there's a rules-based order piece of the conversation that I think is where we need to focus more, where they've already stated some of their desired goals in the world. They don't think democracy is the way that society should run. They think the autocratic, authoritarian society is the way to run a world. And they export technologies to help others do things like that. So it's not just the intelligence community sort of making things up or having things on our own that no one else has access to. We can look at the statements, we can look at the stated goals and desires and see there's a possibility that this could present a challenge in the future, not only to the US, but to others. There are also a lot of opportunities, right? It's a huge population. There's some very creative people. There are capabilities that not only we would like to take advantage of in this country, but that we would also like to be able to economically benefit from their markets. We will have to figure out what that balance is, but certainly as a country that, we're going to go out and profess democratic values as being the thing that we believe should underpin the world. They're going to profess different values. We're going to have to figure out how to work through those. So not so much a prediction, but the things that we're going to have tension over are pretty clear. Where it goes is sort of dependent on whether each of us is going to sort of change our minds about how we're going to approach those conversations and those realities. Is the world that they're presenting, is the world that they're trying to put in place the world that we want to support? in many ways, it's not the values that I see us supporting. So we're going to continue with that one. So there'll continue to be a challenge, whether it is a challenge that we can't work through. I hope not. I think there's a lot of challenges in the world, climate change being one of them, that frankly, if we don't work together on that, there are going to be a lot more implications, national security implications and other implications, and so we're going to have to figure out those kinds of places. And there are other ones, frankly, that we do. So focus on the ones where we know that we can work while we sort of deal with the tension in those places that we don't have agreement on, how we see the world and how we think that the countries and nations should sort of interact with each other and their citizens.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon, for being here today. I'm Nam Kathari. I'm a second-year Georgia Tech student, interning at DC and Govini. You talked about partnerships within the industry and within the intelligence community. What do you think this looks like? What are some of the challenges, hurdles in building this partnership, and how do you see it expanding in the next decade?
So I'll start at the end. Partnerships have expanded and will continue to expand, and they're expanding in an interesting way. And I think Russia's invasion of Ukraine pointed this out in a way that we're so all reflecting on. Many are reflecting on this, but it was the partnerships with NATO and others beyond NATO. It was those extended alliances, those abilities to have conversations with and share information with more people than, we sort of have a set group. We work with the Five Eyes a lot. That is a group, Canada, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Great Britain. We certainly work with them. I left someone out there. And us. We certainly work with them a lot. But these conflicts are showing us the need for conversations and alliances way beyond those particular traditional partners. So looking at our sharing arrangements with them, what information can we share securely? How do we work with them and make sure that our data, if we choose to share it, will be safe in their repositories? Like, we see a lot more of that happening. And you see a little bit of it, sort of on the national level. You see sort of AUKUS as being something that was created new. You see these sort of conversations about the Quad and Quints. So different combinations of individuals to be able to counter particular challenges that we see in the world. So that's on the foreign side. On the industry side, we've always been partners with industry. I mean, the intelligence community, despite the fact that we say that we develop things, it's always been with our industry partners, either sort of outsourcing things that they develop for us, or even bringing individuals in-house where they developed it in partnership with our scientists and engineers. That is going to continue. I can't remember if Dan or Andrew, which one of you said this, but industry, a lot of the innovation happens there. It happens at a faster scale. And while everything that industry creates isn't necessarily perfect made for our mission, it's a great starting point so that we're not having to develop things from scratch. It's not always as easy to apply it directly, so that sometimes does take some extra effort, but I don't see those kinds of relationships decreasing. And academia has always been a huge partner to us. A lot of the basic research that's done in these places underpins future capabilities that we know that our community is going to need. So partnerships, you see it in every new strategy, whether it's our national intelligence strategy, which we published a few months ago. As we're having these conversations about our data strategy, we're also talking with our partners about those. So partnerships, you will be hearing and continue to hear a lot more about partnerships now and in the future. Everything we do will involve partners.
Thank you.
Morning, Dr. Dixon. Thank you for being here. I work for the government. You spoke a couple of months ago at my agency, and one of the things that you had mentioned was I think that there were a couple of pilots or studies that you were looking into in terms of hiring. I think working for the intelligence community takes a long time. There's a clearance process. And one of the specific things you mentioned was that there are many communities of people who don't have the luxury of time. They can't wait a year to start the job they hope they're going to get. And also within recruiting itself, there are some communities who are hesitant to work for the government based on bad interactions in the past or through their families. And I was wondering if you had, so this was a couple of months ago, I was wondering if you had any updates on that study and sort of where we are right now.
Thank you for that question. This is one of those sort of good news stories that we haven't reached the end. I'm not saying it's complete, that we've succeeded, but we are working towards it. So yes, getting into our community through the clearance process and really the onboarding process, which is both the HR and the security pieces, that takes a long time. Years in some cases, it sort of was a best case for a little while. We're trying to reduce that across our community and committed to reducing that to 180 days. And that is for, on average, for the average case. That is going to, we hope, improve the ability of people not to have to wait on us. The other thing is, why wait until someone, for example, is graduated from school? You see a lot more people interacting earlier in a academic tenure of a student, so that by the time they graduate, in some cases, they already have their clearance. We always definitely encourage internships, because that's a great way to be able to get a clearance and be able to see if you would like working with our community. On the other side of it, in terms of encouraging communities to be interested in working with us, we spend a lot of time going out. Whenever we're out traveling for other reasons, we'll see if we can add on a university visit or high school visit, just to have the conversation about public service, about working in the intelligence community with, frankly, students who, in many cases, have not had anyone from the intelligence community come and talk to their school. And so they don't even know that it's a possibility of a great career for them. They don't know that we, frankly, would welcome their talent in our community. And so continuing to have those conversations and to sort of cast that wider net, we recognize today especially there's a lot more competition. I mean, already there's the competition for salary, but now there's competition for people being able to work from home. Yeah. We will be as flexible as we can be where we can be in that one, but this is not a career that you want to go into if that is your ultimate goal. So people will self-select in, but that probably means that we need to cast the wider net now, because there are going to be a number of people who want that kind of flexibility going forward. And it's just not something right now that our community is going to be able to embrace for the majority of the work that we do. So those are sort of some things, the ways that we're thinking about it. And then, of course, once we have people in, we want to make sure that we continue to develop them, give them great opportunities, have them take advantage of benefits that we do have to offer, whether it's incentive pay, whether it is, the paying back college loans. There's still things that we can do in the government to try to make it easier for folks, recognizing that the salary is not going to be as competitive, frankly, as they would get out in industry.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Dixon. My name's Tommy. I'm an undergraduate here in the School of Foreign Service. You mentioned that the top technology capabilities today mostly emanate from private sector and industry partners. I'm just curious, how can the U.S. government and the intelligence community be a better customer and partner in terms of acquiring these technologies, maybe exercising some acquisition agility, as you mentioned?
Thank you for mentioning that. One of the eternal criticisms that we get is how long it takes to do business with us, especially when there's sort of a new or emerging technology that we're pretty excited about, like the amount of time that it takes to get into our community, and then the amount of time it actually takes to operationalize it, which is a whole other conversation. So as part of acquisition agility, one piece is making sure that we've got the right numbers of contracting officers, people who can actually work that side of it. And it's a very competitive skill set. We talk a lot about the STEM fields and how we need to bring more of those in, but contracting officers, those who can understand how to sort of translate the technology requirement into what we're actually going to purchase, it's a huge need for us. So how do we make sure that we're incentivizing those individuals to stay, giving them the tools that they need to better automate the kinds of work that we have them doing? Excuse me, is number one. There are authorities that are out there within our federal acquisition regulations that we don't necessarily apply very often. There are very innovative ways to interact with companies that aren't the traditional, the traditional approach that frankly can be used for, the traditional approach is whether you're buying software or whether you're buying an aircraft carrier. The rules are the rules. Clearly buying software, you would want to be more flexible. Clearly buying something that you may use for a brief period of time because you know there are going to be evolutions to that particular software, we want to be more flexible. So we're looking at what we can do to bring in some of those flexibilities, and arming our individuals who are doing that kind of work is sort of first and foremost one of the ways that we're thinking about it.
Awesome. So thank you.
We'll take the criticisms, but we are trying to work to figure out how to make it better.
I'm mindful of Dr. Dixon's time, so we'll do perhaps one or two more questions, and then we'll field some questions from our online audience, and then we'll wrap up. So please.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Dr. Dixon. My name is Shreya. I'm a graduate student at George Washington University. You identified some of the emerging threats that we face and the IC faces today. A lot of these, like climate change, cyber issues in AI, a lot of these are threats where there's a lot of information that exists in the open source and in the private world. So my question is, how can the IC distinguish its approach and its products and retain its competitive edge for its customers, one? And then as an extension, what, according to you, is the right or most effective approach for the IC for stateless or actor-less threats that are more than just military threats to security?
Those are two great questions. I'll start with the first one, and I'll use climate change as sort of the exemplar for that, because it's been something that, frankly, unfortunately, has a very, a political tinge to it. And over the years, our investments in it have gone up and down. What we've done in the past few years is really focus on what is the IC's particular role in this, given that their A is not only open source information, but many others in government who, frankly, have the expertise in being able to kind of explain the what, or the what and the why. For us, it would be, okay, so what is the implication of that? Let's just say we're seeing sea levels rise. That's going to have implications on coastal communities in particular, and a lot of coastal communities include ports and bases, things where military is located, not only in the US, but also internationally. That's going to have implications on the readiness and the security of those places. How do we sort of predict for our policymakers places that, our partners that may have some challenges going forward, so we can engage them on that, frankly, tell them what our science is seeing, and raise the awareness that we all need to kind of think about those implications going forward. So that is one way we're trying to do it. We're not trying to duplicate anything that's out there. We're frankly trying to leverage the best of research, the best of other government agencies and their expertise, and figuring out, and this sort of goes back to sort of the conversation about human capital. How do we also just have access to people who have the expertise where they are? They don't have to come join the intelligence community. They don't have to join the government at all. We just want to be able to interact with them in a way that we can learn from them and frankly benefit from their subject matter. So that's one way we're looking at it. With respect to the question about threats that really don't have a sort of a nation state behind them, these sort of transnational things that are you see them in many parts of the world, and you see them as, migration, for example, is sort of a one. And some of the implications of migration, or some of the root causes of migration, certainly economic issues and sort of the politics of the country itself. But it's also, it can go back to climate change. It can go back to food insecurity. It can go back to those opportunities that don't exist because of what's been changing in the landscape. How do we better predict how that is going to impact us? How do we leverage partnerships in many different places to be able to deal with something like that? One of the ways that we're looking at how do you use the expertise we have our National Counterterrorism Center, which certainly was created as a result of 9/11. And they remain busy. Just the fact that we've pivoted to other things doesn't mean that terrorism is not there. We clearly see that it still is. But we also know that they have a lot of expertise on how to deal with networks of individuals who are working outside of the law to, frankly, do something criminal. How do we leverage the knowledge that they have, or the tools that they have, and apply them to other things? We know that fentanyl production is a challenge in this country, and it is something that we consider in that transnational realm. How do we leverage the knowledge and techniques that we've used in the intelligence community for other things to help with that, so that we can better protect this country from foreign precursors that may be coming in, and foreign completed fentanyl products that may be coming in? So we're trying to sort of think about it differently, think about the problem differently, and see how else we can apply knowledge that we already have, or knowledge that exists elsewhere to help us solve those things.
With apologies to the rest of the students, I know there's a lot of interest and a lot of questions. I want to make sure we have one or two questions from our online audience. So would our representative who's fielding that like to come forward and ask one or two of those questions, please?
Hi. Okay, so from Konstantinos online, his question is, data collection and management can determine our perception and can be manipulated for strategic purposes. So to what extent can we use data ethically?
Ooh. I think that we can, number one. And part of it is sort of making that as the foundation. We have a very active civil liberties and privacy organization, and a piece of what they want to make sure that we're doing with all of the investments, all the capabilities that we're using in our mission, is to make sure that we're using it ethically. It sort of underpins, our AI ethics principles underpin that other thing. Our use of data also needs to, for the very reasons you mentioned, be underpinned by that particular foundation, as this is where we start. So one of the things that you see in our activities, and one of the things also that I was also happy to see in the executive order, is the need to look at test data to look at the algorithms and the testing of those algorithms so that we have better insight into what the limitations are, what the challenges are with the particular ones, whether they actually have biases in any particular way. So challenging us to not only sort of be excited about the tool and the application, but to go that next step and to really dig into making sure that it's not selecting data to come up with a particular outcome. It's not having a disparate effect on, or it's not having a disparate outcome with one group than it would have with a different group based on whatever the inputs is in particular algorithm. So how do you just make sure you're continuing to have those conversations as you're developing the tools and certainly as you're implementing them in your mission space?
Great, thank you. Our second question is, did the IC have significant input on President Biden's executive order from this past week on AI? That is from Carl.
Yes, we and many others did. I mean, it's the beautiful thing about the way that these documents are created. There's a lot of conversation with the stakeholders, the folks that will be impacted. So we had a lot of engagement with that, not only within our organization, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, but others within the intelligence community that will be impacted by it. And because all of us are going to be expected, particularly in the section on what you can expect on sort of government use of AI, like all of us will be beholden to whatever guidelines come out of that. And so it was important for us to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dixon. It was such an honor to have you here. Thank you for your insightful remarks and all the robust Q&A with our students. We're very fortunate to have you in a leadership role in the intelligence community and also for lending so much of your time to us today. So please join me in thanking Dr. Dixon. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Great.
Wonderful.